What are the best examples of old corporate greed? Impeding the progress of the internet in the US solely to improve their bottom line. I use TWC, but I found that customer service will do pretty much whatever you say. But you have to initiate the dialogue and complain about their service, in a polite manner because I just feel bad for the actual reps, or else they'll just keep profiting off your laziness or ignorance. 2 times now I've had a sudden surge in my price. Apparently my rebate ran out, but they'll always cave under the pressure and give me an even better rebate once I call in. Another time, my service just suddenly went out for an entire week. I got a new router, which didn't help, so they had to bring someone out during my work hours. Of course, I was told they would be compensating me for all this hassle and lost service. When I got the bill, not only was it my standard rate, but they also added a service call charge for the truck coming out. I called in, complained, again politely, even suggesting they should compensate me for the hour of work I missed. The poor rep ended up slashing my price for the month to basically nothing. Again, they will screw you over, but only if you refuse to stand up for yourself and just lay there. Not a very ideal business model for the customer, and I don't respect these companies, but you just have to be firm with them. And no, for the last time, I don't give a crap about TV and phones, and I don't actually believe your name is Greg. I'm realizing this may not be universal and may in fact relate to Google Fiber's imminent arrival in my area. Nothing like some competition to ruin a crappy monopoly. Story 2. My company went public a few years back. The CEO announces that there will be no raises that year to ensure a good report for our investors. However, there will be bonuses. Hey, alright, cool. If you don't understand why this is shady, it's because execs mostly only get paid in bonuses and stock. So he and his pals all cleaned up, made a few mil, got a few 100,000 stock options. Sure, we as regular employees also got a handful of shares, less than 50, and an okay bonus, think 5% of salary. However, we as regular employees rely more on raises to keep our future net worth going, as that small bonus is a drop in the bucket compared to what they got long term. And friends, this is how every public company is run. Welcome to the fun. They only really care about themselves. Always. That will never change. Story 3. In the 90s, corporate greed combined with political greed to effect one of the greatest scams ever. Number 1. President Clinton and Speaker Gingrich agree on welfare reform that creates workfare. If you want to get welfare, you have to have a job. Number 2. Employers, namely Walmart, figure out that they can pay employees less because the government will make up the difference between their pay and a living wage. I say figure out because they helped write the law. Number 3. Minimum wage gets parked at roughly half of living wage. Today, the living wage is roughly $15 an hour. Federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. It just so happens that if you qualify for welfare, or WIC, or AFDC, or SNAP, your benefits come to about $8 an hour. What has happened is that businesses like Walmart have offloaded a huge portion of their payroll to the public. In 2014, a Forbes article, hardly a bastion of liberal thought, estimated the cost at $6.2 billion for Walmart alone. And to add insult to injury, 18% of all SNAP, food stamps, benefits were spent at a Walmart. In other words, they not only profit by paying their employees so little they have to get public assistance, they make a profit on the assistance provided. Walmart is the largest private employer in the country, so they have a disproportionate impact on the overall labor market, and because their wages are low, the wages for the entire retail sector have lowered. In 1993, I got paid $8.75 an hour plus commission at Dillard's. In current dollars, that's $14.35 an hour. I averaged $150 a pay period in commission, adding roughly $2 an hour, or roughly $17 total in current dollars. Today, that same job at Dillard's is $9 an hour plus commission, but the commission structure almost guarantees little or no payment. And of course, none of this takes into account the tax breaks Walmart and other businesses routinely extract from local and state governments. Story 4. United Fruit Company in the 1954 Guatemalan coup. Guatemala was a banana republic, and the United Fruit Company was the largest landholder in Guatemala and owned the country's only Atlantic port. They made massive profits by paying no taxes and hardly paying the workers anything. 50 cents a day when minimum wage in the USA was 75 cents an hour. Annual profits were over twice as much as Guatemala's government revenue. Only 15% of the UFC's land was being cultivated, and the democratically elected government of Guatemala implemented land reforms and seized the unused land and paid the UFC back twice as much as they originally paid for it. The government also implemented labor reforms that allowed workers to strike and demand better wages. This cut into the UFC's profits, so they aggressively lobbied the US government to convince them that the Guatemalans were communists in league with the USSR. This helped lead to the CIA coup that overthrew the democratically elected government of Guatemala. For banana profits. That is bananas. Story 5. Greed, you say? My old company keeps its employees tip money, legally. It's the venue for a lot of weddings and large private parties. They have a team of around 10 servers in charge of decorating, catering, and cocktail serving for each event. Despite doing quite a lot of work for these parties, the employees get paid minimum wage. The area's average hourly wage for workers in similar catering positions is about $11 plus tips. That's not even the greediest bit. This company charges a flat 20% service fee on all food and beverage for each venue's bill. The company then keeps the entire service fee. That's illegal, they should be sued, everyone says, but the company was already sued and they already won, since service fee doesn't describe whose service the fee is for, so they're allowed to charge gratuity and not even give it to the waitstaff. Problem is, since customers know they're paying a service fee, they assume they don't need to leave a tip. As you can guess, servers don't get compensated nearly enough for the amount of work they do. Can you imagine spending 10 hours working on a wedding and making peanuts in wages for it? Sometimes that exact same venue is split for a day and they have a wedding in the morning and again in the afternoon, so you have to clean up for one wedding and set up for a second one, using all of that bride's colors and decorations in a 1-hour gap. That's no easy task. Here's what's even worse. The company has been caught keeping tip money that customers set aside specifically for employees. Someone threw a birthday party at the venue and knew the bartender. Turns out they were old workmates. So the guy throwing the party said he was leaving the bartender an extra $100 tip at the front office. He put the money in an envelope with the employee's name on it and left it at the front office with one of the company's owners. They kept it. When the customer and the bartender complained, the owners just went, "Oopsie, we didn't know it was a tip because you didn't specify what it was for." Normally, the workers just suspect the office is keeping their tip money since it's hard to prove anything was left there at all. But it's hard to imagine that every time a customer says, "I'll leave you guys an extra tip at the front office," they don't leave anything. Anyway, I left that company years ago and I have no idea what kind of legal battles they're facing, if any. I do know that their turnover rates are crazy high, and they have a hard time finding bartenders that want to work for minimum wage. They're not very well liked in this community. Story 6. Microsoft in the 90s. To combat the rise of Linux, they basically said to computer manufacturers, on every computer you sell, you use a license fee. Even if the computer has Linux instead of Microsoft, you still owe us a fee. And since they had a monopoly, no computer manufacturer could move away. Blatantly illegal, but basically helped end Linux on the desktop for years. Or they used their huge war chest to give away Internet Explorer for free to end Netscape. That's called dumping. Spend a crap load of money to end a competitor. Then realizing that Java would make holding their Windows monopoly tougher to hold, since it's written once, run anywhere, they created their own version of Java, J++, that can only be run on Windows. There's a reason why no one touches Microsoft platforms unless they absolutely have to. Fortunately, their new CEO is a different type of guy, but many data centers have a strict no Microsoft policy for very sane reasons. Story 7. I worked for WorldCom when the walls came down and the whole shebang happened with Bernie Ebbers. Not 10 minutes after that happened, the VP of sales flew out to my office and straight out asked me which of my large customers they could get away with overbilling. I told him I'd have to think about it, but my customers were typically structured in a way that they would notice if their bills had any variance to them. This was not true. I had a dozen customers who were excellent candidates for overbilling, but I wasn't about to wreck my reputation in the industry for these greedy jerks. A couple of months later, 3 of my customers called me complaining that their bills were wrong. It was blatant too. They had a huge dollar line item added to their bill with no description. All 3 of them were cool about it because they knew I would fix it. And I did. I looked into some of my other large customers and they were overbilled too, but they hadn't noticed it. I had those fixed too. Good on this guy. A good worker goes unnoticed by his customers. If you're enjoying these stories, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel so you wouldn't miss out on any of my upcoming videos. Now let's get back to the stories. Story 8. There are a lot of infuriating examples given here, but I'd argue the worst cases are those which are harder to see. Many products are designed specifically to be more expensive to repair and easier to break simply to force a customer to buy a new one sooner than they might have needed to. The amount of waste, both environmentally and economically from this type of practice, taken in aggregate is staggering. In practice, even though the GDP might be higher, it does not help the economy because the money does not go as far in inferior products. The amount of resources wasted, the pollution created, and the labor misallocated are all costs we pay, and all for a worse economy. But it will continue to happen so long as it is in each company's best interest to hide the true cost per use from consumers to artificially inflate the number of units they sell, even as they, as companies, spend more than they need to because they need to buy goods from other companies doing the same underhanded trick. Another one is the Ford Pinto case. Pinto was a compact car launched in the 70s. Ford was under pressure to launch it as soon as possible to compete with imported cars. Security checks revealed that the cars had a major design flaw that made it vulnerable to catching on fire. Knowing this, they still went with production because a few jerks did a cost-beneficial analysis that stated that the expected costs of lawsuits, calculated by approximating the number of such incidences multiplied by 200,000, the value of a human life, was less than the cost of repair in all items, $11 per car. If that isn't dirtbaggery of the highest degree, I don't know what is. Story 9. I was involved in capital spending for a medium-sized privately owned company in the food business. On a particular day, I was in 2 separate meetings and heard the following 2 reports. Update on the $750,000 project to refurbish the interior of Jet 2. Jet number 2 will be out of service for another month as it is being returned to Cessna to replace the new leather because the hand stitching on the seats was done by 2 different people and the spacing isn't uniform. Then later in the day, update on the impact of Obamacare. Currently under our self-insured plan, the company saves $750,000 per year due to employees hitting their maximum annual or maximum lifetime benefit and being cut off. In 2 years, as Obamacare is phased in, the savings will go away. It was on that day that my political view shifted from the right wing, trickle-down BS had been raised on, to a more liberal view. 90% of the workers in the company were low-wage agricultural workers. I think their annual healthcare limit was $100,000. So near minimum wage workers that spent 20-plus years working for the company were being dropped by our insurance plan if they got cancer, heart disease, etc. Dude, these companies are so stupid. Those are your most valued employees. You're not taking care of them. Story 10. Smaller scale, but it worked for the restaurant group as a waiter. It started off great, actually. Then they started making changes. Dropped our hours, despite the contract saying 30 PW. Added potential shifts where you'd wait to hear on the day if you were needed. If you didn't show, you'd get a telling off. Then what they did for their customers. They had decent food for a year and a half. Then they decided to cut their sizes of the meals down and raise the prices. So as a thank you to customers, they essentially charged more for less. The food was worse, too. That's so scummy to me and shows a real disrespect to your employees and customers. If you're helping neither of them, what are you really doing? Also, Enron is a good example of corporate greed as it relates to what capitalism allows for. The use is an accounting practice that basically lets them account for future profits that hadn't arrived yet, but they had the deal signed. They took this so much to the extreme that they ended up underwater without any actual real cash flow. Thousands upon thousands of people lost millions of dollars in stock and retirement options. The CEO, Ken Lay, passed away from old age before he could be prosecuted, and his main partner in crime, Jeff Skilling, actually had his original sentence reduced for good behavior. He won't have as much as he did when he went into prison, but he'll still have a couple million when he comes out. Story 11. Monsanto for multiple reasons, especially their practices with seed development, production, and distribution. GMOs aren't that bad, but Monsanto is the worst. Monsanto, the real issue. Monsanto is your typical long-standing super corporation. Incredibly intelligent, incredibly rich, and incredibly messed up. One of their most notorious product creations was a chemical by the name of Agent Orange, which was used for chemical warfare in Vietnam. Since that time, they began to use that same knack for helpful technology for food production and agricultural domination. Monsanto is most notorious for their Roundup Ready products, seeds that grow their own pesticides, for instance, as well as creating seeds that can't reproduce after their first growth, forcing farmers who buy the seeds to continue buying year after year. Monsanto routinely sues farmers who have the opportunity to save seeds for use in future crops for a breach of contract. That's right, Monsanto has a clause built right into their sales contracts that give them the right to sue any farmer who reproduces food from the previous year's crops. Sustainability obviously isn't a big priority in Monsanto's business plan, but their financial strategies are quite clever. You may be asking yourself why farmers would continue buying these seeds knowing that they can only use them once and risk being sued for doubling up on crop production. The answer is strictly based on finances. Monsanto, being as intelligent as they are, have completely dominated the seed market to the point where they control the price. If you want non-Monsanto or GMO seeds, you're going to pay out for them. Monsanto also has a hand in all the major subsidized foods in Canada and the US. Calm, soy, etc., which means if a farmer wants a break in the cost of his food production, he's likely going to receive those savings on a Monsanto brand product. Again, Monsanto knows what's up, and they've put themselves in a very dominant position in North America agriculture. Another one on the top of my head, it's a minor example, but it always pissed me off when Gillette came out with that indicator strip to tell me when it's time to change my razor. It's like, bro, I'll decide when to throw out this $6 blade. And it's going to be when shaving hurts so much that I wake up the next morning debating calling in sick just so I don't have to shave. Not when some stupid line turns white. Glad they got rid of it. Story 12. Here's a few. Some banks increase their bounce check fees by clearing the biggest check through an account first so that many smaller checks will then bounce. If they get $25 per bounce check and there are 10 other checks, they can then charge $250 instead of just $25 for the one big check. Sleazy. Stores like Walmart limit most of their workers to 30 hours per week so that they don't have to provide benefits for them. Most insurance companies, they're fine with you paying them loads of money every month, but as soon as you have a bad accident of some sort, you need to either pay loads more or they just flat out drop you. Toothpaste companies advertising the need to put toothpaste in an entire toothbrush when you apparently only need a pea-sized amount. Big banks making billions of dollars off fees and overdraft charges. Oh, you're broke? Let me go ahead and charge you some money for being broke. Printer ink. Those ink cartridges often aren't really empty. Replacing a set sometimes costs more than the original printer. Oreos packaging. Their recommended serving size is 2 cookies, and yet there is always an odd number of cookies in the package. They are saving money one frustrating cookie at a time. Coke and Pepsi go into great lengths to convince consumers that tap water and Brita filters are bad and only bottled water is good for you. Except a lot of bottled water has been proven to be just tap water. Processed food, aka junk food like chips, fries, Cheetos, Chex-Mix, Coke, pizza, cereal, etc., that is designed to be extremely easy to eat, taste good, and are very, very, very unhealthy. They pack in huge amounts of carbohydrates that are not filling but have tons of calories. When eating junk food causes high blood sugar, which causes the pancreas to overproduce insulin, which causes the body to use up all of the blood sugar. And the person gets really, really tired because they have a sugar crash. Most people just drink coffee to wake up. This food causes heart disease, diabetes, and has been linked to cancer. Yet this food is cheap as hell to produce and has a massive markup. A bag of chips probably costs something like 10 cents to make, but they sell that crap for $3 a bag. The housing bubble that caused the global financial crisis of 2007 to 2008 in the States. Rather than the companies being at fault for ruining the economy, the Bush administration allotted a tax or state-paid $700 billion buyout. Best thing about it was that the CEOs that caused this crash got away with fraud and were paid multi-million to $100 million plus bonuses. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're gonna love this. Catch you in that video.